Hello, readers by eyes and by ears. Guess what? We are on the final recording of The Imperial Uncle by Feng Gua Guo with just 2 extras and 1 afterword. So I hope you all have enjoyed this story and that it has tickled your funny bone or your anxiety bone at this rate. But anyway, let's go ahead and begin the final pages. Enjoy. Extra. Intoxicated. 1. It was the 6th month, with summer rain streaming down. I sat at the window, looking at the lake-colored mists outside with an inexpressible feeling wreathing my heart. Zhao Cai and I had been together 2 or 3 years. We had been doing pretty well. Zhao Cai had an excellent character. He never rushed or became restless in anything he did. It was only now that we were together that I was finding we had quite a lot of preferences in common. We both liked salty and spicy foods, and traveling around to take in the sights. That my father-in-law was the scholar of the red leaves of the Western Hills? I later learned as well. I read all the secret unpublished manuscripts. Old Grand Tutor Leo really had been an unusual person. Despite being such a stuffy old man, he had fathered a son like my father-in-law, and that had led to Zhao Cai. A treasure I hardly deserved. Zhao Cai and I lived like this in the fullness of conjugal affection, but perhaps man has an inherent weakness that leads him to be just a little unsatisfied. I thought that my and Zhao Cai's life together was too smooth, so smooth there were no waves, as if something were missing. For example, if I wanted hot pot for lunch, he would say he also wanted it. If he said he didn't want to go out today, by coincidence, I also wouldn't feel like moving. For another example, in doing certain things, he wouldn't protest, regardless of time or place. He wouldn't say a gazebo wasn't private enough, and we might be seen. He wouldn't complain that the slope of the hill was too dirty, wouldn't push me away and say the courtyard was too cold at night. Couldn't we go inside? It was perfect harmony between us from start to finish. I asked him whether I had gone overboard, but he never said anything. He calmly bathed with me, calmly slept, and remembered to pick up scattered articles of clothing and put them back in place, neatly folded. He calmly let me hold him, and the next morning he calmly got up. I deliberately went to disturb him while he was busy with work. I snatched away his ledger and brush, and he didn't push me away, didn't tell me to settle down. He didn't even frown, only moved the inkstone, teacup, and so on from his desk, and then I could do whatever I wanted. Afterward, he straightened his clothes, put everything back in place, and sat down at his desk, as if he'd just had a cup of tea. I asked him indirectly, "Zhao Cai, do you find that there's anything wrong with me?" And he smiled and said, "No." I asked, "Really? I have many bad habits." He said, "I have many myself, so I don't feel you have especially many." So I stopped asking and felt even more lonesome. Tongyi. Perhaps a problem had arisen when he was given that name, like agree. He would never say, "I don't agree." This isn't a footnote, but I'm just going to share it with you. Tong-yee. Tong-yee is how you say to agree in Mandarin. Anyway, continuing the reading. When he liked something, he wouldn't eat very much of it, and when he didn't like something, he wouldn't eat very much of it. He rose at the hour of the rabbit and went to bed at the second watch of the night. He ate plain porridge in the morning and drank weak tea at night. I thought that, in his eyes, perhaps I was that bowl of thin porridge in the morning, that weak tea at night. I had never even seen him drunk. Zhao Cai said he couldn't hold his liquor. He became drunk very easily. Every time I maliciously induced him to drink, after a cup or two, he would always put his cup down and say, "I really can't drink anymore." Then he would keep eating. Today at midday, it was the same. I sat by the window a while, then went to take a midday nap. I closed my eyes and recalled the past. A person was most likely to reveal his true nature when he was drunk. When Chushuan was drunk, he cried. As he cried, he laughed and asked me, "Your Highness, tell me, what am I?" I said, "You are my Ami, nothing else." And he laughed louder. When Yu was drunk, he tended to sleep. He became irascible if I told him to lie down. When I tried to help him to bed, he'd even torn my robe. Even Qizhe had once been drunk in front of me. He clung to me and said, "Uncle, actually, we are miserable." I said, "I know. How can you be emperor and not miserable?" Then a young palace eunuch and I together moved heaven and earth to coax him to bed. And the next day I couldn't be left in peace. I had to be summoned. "Last night we drank with you, Imperial Uncle, and seemed to have become intoxicated. We do not remember anything." I said very confidently, "I was also drunk and do not remember anything either. If I forgot myself, I hope your majesty will forgive me." Finally, a trace of a smile appeared on my Imperial Uncle's face, and he turned the page. But even so, it was still better than Liu Tongyi not getting drunk even once. I, Jing Wei-yi, was not normally stubborn about anything, but once stubbornness came over me, I had to follow through. That afternoon, I went to walk through the market and really did run across something. An old foreign man with a pole over his shoulder was selling a kind of wine that was supposed to be a secret recipe from his country. I tried some. It tasted about the same as freshly tapped coconut milk. But apparently the after effects were very strong. A grown man who could easily drink a whole jar of wine would be down after 5 cups. I was delighted and took out a silver ingot. "I'll take all the wine you have, sir." Oh, God. Oh, Lordy. 2. That evening, I had dinner laid out in the outer chamber of the bedroom. I dismissed our attendants, leaving only myself and Zhao Cai seated across from each other. "You've been busy with discussions all day," I said. "For dinner, I procured a few nice dishes, and at the market, I happened to run into a foreign kind of fruit drink that tastes much like coconut milk. They say it's wine, but I've tasted it, and it's hardly alcoholic. You don't like wine? Try this and see if it's to your taste." Zhao Cai took the glass bowl of coconut milk and tasted it. I asked him, "Is it good?" He smiled. "How rare to be able to taste fresh coconut milk here." Against my conscience, I said, "I know you like coconuts, so I bought a whole load. There's plenty. Drink up." Zhao Cai smiled again and said nothing, only cast down his eyes and drank the coconut milk. Seeing his smile and his gaze, I felt a sudden twinge of guilt. No, I couldn't go soft. I only wanted to see what Zhao Cai was like when he wasn't calm. This was to make our lives more interesting, to increase our affection and harmony. I imagined what Zhao Cai would be like when he was drunk and no longer calm, as well as how he would be afterward in my embrace. The room heated up at once. My heart danced like a candle flame. Naturally, Zhao Cai didn't notice my passions. He put down the glass bowl and began to eat. I had deliberately put a spicy dish in the position where he often picked up food. It had been made with plenty of the recently delivered spicy sauce. Even someone with a tolerance for spicy food would probably find the flavor a little too much. As expected, after he ate a mouthful, he immediately picked up the bowl of coconut milk and drank a bit. "Is it too spicy?" I asked. "Have some of the vegetables." I added a green lotus bun with boiled cabbage to his plate. When he ate it, his brow furrowed slightly. I ate some right after him and hypocritically said, "Why is it so salty?" Oh my God. So he drank another swallow. I served him salted steamed chicken, river snails in chili oil, Yunnan ham in sauce. My hand shook slightly as I served him. Had it been someone less good-tempered than Zhao Cai, they would probably have pushed their bowl away and asked me, "Is it the cook trying to salt me to death or you?" But not Zhao Cai. He only asked, "Why are the flavors a little heavy today?" Shamelessly, I said, Oh, perhaps old monk got drunk and overdid the seasonings. Zhao didn't say anything else, only drank more and more. I had hoped he would be drunk after a few swallows, but instead he finished the whole bowl. Once he was done, he put the glass bowl aside and began to eat porridge. I studied him inconspicuously and found that his manner was perfectly normal. He seemed as collected as usual and no different. Had that old foreign man lied to me? But I tried it on a couple of pages that afternoon, and after half a bowl of the same size, they had been under the table. So was Zhao alcohol tolerance actually better than I imagined? Was it just impossible for him to get drunk? As I was pondering things, a fly that had flown in buzzed over the table and started circling. Zhao looked up and frowned slightly. A cold draft brushed past his face. Thunk! The fly was pinned to the wall behind me by a chopstick. I turned my head stiffly. I looked at the chopstick, then at Zhao. You... Zhao looked at me. The corners of his lips tipped up slightly. What? You want to ask whether I'm drunk? I was a little muddled. I could only smile. How do you know martial arts? Zhao calmly picked up a handkerchief and wiped his mouth. I read a lot of books when I was little and wanted to put what I read into practice. I trained for a bit. He picked up an empty bowl from the table and pulled it apart. Snap! The bowl turned into two neat halves. The break was smooth. He smacked the corner of the table. Crunch! It broke off. The room became even hotter. My robe stuck to my back. I've never seen you use these skills. He patted the arm of his chair. Thwop, thwop. The arm splintered into pieces. I trained after drinking wine in secret. I can only use these skills when I'm drunk, so I don't dare to become intoxicated. What? I recalled that my father-in-law had written a book about a drunken hero. I guess that was the origin of Zhao martial arts training. Oh, I said. It seems this coconut milk is more alcoholic than expected. If you're drunk, you should go to bed. Zhao looked at me, his eyes unreadable. Didn't you get me drunk on purpose tonight? Whatever you want to do, you can do it now. Cold sweat dripped from me like rain. Yes, I'd nearly forgotten. Zhao had once been chamberlain of the Court of Judicial Review. I wiped my forehead. Listen, Zhao, He laughed. I know. You've always thought I was very dull. I'm much too prim. I said at once, no, Zhao, I was only... He raised a hand. Enough. You don't need to defend yourself. Actually, I've always thought that you and I weren't a good match, so I didn't know whether we ought to be together. But because I love you, time after time, I still turned back to find you. I knew you'd think I was prim and dull, but I still stayed with you. Something seemed to clench around my heart, then relaxed. Zhao, he said he loved me. He'd said he loved me. He stood, got out a piece of paper, and slapped it down in front of me. Crack! A gap opened in the table. This is Yunyu's address. His and Wan Tianshan's whereabouts are unfixed, but every year during the 7th month, they go to this place to avoid the summer heat. My heart chilled. I grabbed him by a sleeve. Zhao. He sneered and cut me off before I could start. Some things you make too much of for yourself. So what if Yunyu is your nephew? Oh, I know. The one you truly love is actually... I grabbed him. I love you. He stared intently at me and shook his head. I don't believe you. You asked me if there was something wrong with you, but you didn't think the problem was with you. You thought it was with me. I know our temperaments don't match. Happiness doesn't come by forcing it. You should go to the person who suits you best. What you think of as obstacles will cease to be once you've smashed them. Bang! Half the table collapsed. The plates, bowls, and cups came crashing to the ground. Fortunately, I had instructed the servants not to come in even if the sky fell. My heart was breaking with regret. Zhao, I thought the two of us were too good a match. I was just trying to make things more interesting. Why had these ancient scores come up again? He sighed. But I don't understand. Why did you want to get me drunk tonight? Did you want to hear the truth from me? Now that I've said everything, let's break it off. A cleaver stabbed me in the heart. I'd had some of the coconut milk too. I was a little tipsy. My tongue couldn't keep up. I threw my arms around him. Unless I'm dead, don't even think about breaking it off. He stared at me. Why not? I didn't want to defend myself anymore. Actions speak louder than words. I simply tore open his belt. He laughed, and my robe tore. Before breaking it off, I want to do something, or else I'll be losing out. Zhao and I ended up locked in a fierce, biting kiss. I wasn't sure who had initiated it. From the outer chamber, we made it into the bedroom. When all our clothes were gone and I was about to... The situation took a turn. Zhao scooped up the salve on the bedside table. His hand slowly traveled down my back. I was astounded. At my age, great hero Liu, why don't we give this matter some further thought? Crack! A piece broke off the bed frame. ... What happened after, I would rather not mention. At any rate, afterward, with the very last breath remaining to me, I said to Zhao, whether you believe it or not, I couldn't live the rest of my life without you. If you want to kill me, all you have to do is leave me. He narrowed his eyes and looked at me. Really? If you don't believe it, try and see what happens, I said. He shook his head. You've always been all over the place. I really don't dare to believe it. He struck the headboard. Crack! Another piece broke off the bed frame. But I do. 3. The next morning when I stumbled out of bed, Zhao was in the outer chamber reading at the table. On the table was a steaming cup of tea. He stood. You're awake? I've had breakfast prepared. It's nearly noon. But you should still eat some. He was just the same as usual. My head was splitting. I rubbed my temples. Last night, I had a strange dream. For some reason, I feel like I'm falling apart. With a slight smile, Zhao asked, Oh, what was the dream? As I recalled it, I shuddered. It was really too nonsensical. As gentle, good-tempered, and refined as Zhao was, how could he... I put an arm around his waist and bent my head to give him a kiss. Don't worry about it. It was just a silly dream. A page came in bringing food. He was already used to my and Zhance's intimacy and laid the table deftly. I sat down and gasped, instantly breaking out in a cold sweat. Zhance sat down beside me at the brand new table. So gently, ever so gently, he said to me, We'll have milder food for a couple of days. Just put up with it. He took a small vial from his sleeve. Snowball. Sorry. Snowbalm from the healer's hall. After we eat, I'll help you apply some. Crack. This time, it was the bowl in my hand that shattered. After we ate, I'm so sorry. After we ate, I went to the rear courtyard and had a whole load of coconut milk poured out. From that day forward, I did not dare get Zhanse drunk again. Oh, God. Extra. Sour soup noodles. 1. It was the 3rd day of the last month and snowing heavily. I was drinking beside a stove in a felt tent in the style of the Northwestern peoples. A whole sheep roasted over the fire, sizzling and dripping with oil. Strong liquor burned in my throat. When I finished my cup, a foreign girl wearing a small pearl-studded hat immediately refilled it from a tin pot, smiling broadly, showing her teeth, her thin waist gently twisting. Certainly, Han girls wouldn't behave like this. I smiled in spite of myself. Her dense eyelashes fluttered, and she sat gracefully at my side. Just then, the tent flap was pulled aside, and Sichuan barged in. Bending down, he whispered, "Sir, there's trouble at home. You must hurry back." I was slightly surprised. Sichuan made a vague sign with his hand. It was palace business. I had no choice but to rise, put on a cloak, and leave the tent. The wind drove huge snowflakes into my face. If not for the felt carpet at my feet to prevent slipping and the houses visible all around, I really might have believed myself to be beyond the northern frontier. Sichuan glanced from side to side and said quietly, "Your Highness, there's someone from the palace waiting at the manor. He says His Majesty is refusing to eat." If His Majesty wasn't eating, as a loyal subject, I couldn't enjoy a meal in peace either. This was what it meant to be a subject. It was indispensable that, in spite of the heavy snow and slippery ground, I ordered the carriage to speed home with every appearance of great emergency. Wang Yo was pacing anxiously around the heated eastern hall, his face a picture of misery. "Your Highness is back at last. His Majesty is seriously ill and will not eat. The Imperial physicians and Imperial kitchens can do nothing. Her Majesty, the Empress Dowager, ordered me to invite your Highness to the palace." When His Majesty wasn't eating, what use was it to come to me? Though inwardly I grumbled, I still swiftly changed my clothes and followed Wang Yo to the palace. In fact, His Majesty's illness was all the Empress Dowager's doing. Recently, 2 provinces in the north had experienced catastrophic snowfalls. The refugees were freezing. The damage was extensive. It was necessary for the court to swiftly allocate provisions and accelerate the construction of housing for the refugees. But the Empress Dowager, who had a very high opinion of her own intelligence, thought that she must do something ostentatious to display her benevolence and virtue. So she said that His Majesty must have done something wrong to cause heaven to send this calamity. She had the emperor eat millet buns and pickled vegetables for 10 days and wouldn't let him eat his fill. Every day before going to court, before going to sleep, he had to spend a shirchan kneeling and copying scriptures to beg heaven's forgiveness. How much time is there in one night? This is simply not letting the child sleep. Qizhe had never been especially robust, and he had always been sensitive to cold. With the Empress Dowager tormenting him like this, unable to put on a fur-lined coat, dressed only in a padded cotton robe when icicles hung from the eaves, his little face turned sickly pale. I couldn't stand it. Each time I saw him like that, I'd want nothing better than to give him a hot manto and tell him it was all right if he ate a bit. But Chee-juh would say to me with solemnity, "We must do this." Next thing I knew, someone would go report what I said to the Empress Dowager, who would hint to Qizhe that I was interfering with His Majesty's sagacious actions, that I wanted to turn His Majesty into a libertine, self-indulgent ruler. So I had left it alone. While Qizhe was a child of the Jing family, he was the Empress Dowager's son before that, and I wasn't even his real uncle. What was it to me how she disciplined her son? I simply stopped going to the palace to save myself pointless distress. As anyone might have expected, Qizhe held out for 6 days, and then, after a heavy snowfall, fell ill. He took a chill and ran a fever. Now the Empress Dowager was anxious to pile blankets on top of her son, and she made the Imperial kitchens prepare meat, but Qizhe categorically refused to eat it. He wouldn't even drink a single mouthful of hot broth. When I arrived, the Empress Dowager was standing at Qizhe's bedside, sniffling. In the Imperial sleeping quarters, heaters and braziers were lined up like a formation to exorcise demons. I removed my cloak, sweating profusely and on the point of getting heat stroke. I was just about to kneel when the Empress Dowager sobbed, "Your family, Prince Huai, there's no need to kneel." His Majesty said that he wanted to see his Imperial uncle, so I sent for you. His Majesty, go on and see His Majesty now." The palace maids and eunuchs around us whimpered and wept along with the Empress Dowager, just as if my Imperial nephew had already passed away. I went to the bed. Qizhe was wrapped tightly in a brocade quilt, all but his head covered. His face was flushed. He said weakly to me, "Imperial uncle." The Empress Dowager wept. "Don't move, son. Careful not to get chilled." I violently suppressed the urge to rip off the quilt and carry my Imperial nephew out to get some fresh air, then bent over the bed to pay my respects. Qizhe said feebly, "You may dispense the formalities, Imperial uncle. We... He broke off coughing. The Empress summoned the Imperial physician in a trembling voice. I asked tactfully, "Does His Majesty still have a chill? He wasn't suffering from excessive internal heat?" The Imperial physician felt his pulse, then responded, "His Majesty has recovered from his chill, but he will not eat a single meal. I have tried." I shot a glance sideways. There was a table covered in bowls and dishes. Actually, Qizhe had eaten a couple of mouthfuls of porridge, but that was all. He wouldn't touch anything else. Again and again, the Empress Dowager pressed the Imperial physician to prescribe a medicine to invigorate the spleen and improve the appetite. "We wouldn't be here now if you just let your son eat." I leaned down and said to Qizhe, "Your Majesty will not eat. Is that because none of the food from the Imperial kitchen suits your taste? If there is something you wish to eat, tell me, and I will do all I can to obtain it." I was merely asking this in accordance with the scene, but to my surprise, Qizhe's eyes opened wider, and he licked his lips. "Imperial uncle, we suddenly recalled when we ate those sour soup noodles." Oh, he remembered that. I was taken aback. The Empress Dowager threw herself forward. "Noodles? You want to eat noodles? What kind? I'll have the Imperial kitchens prepare them at once. Prince Huai, what noodles does His Majesty want?" Qizhe tossed inside his bedding and looked at me pitifully. "Imperial uncle, the broth has to be vegetarian. We are fasting. We must abstain from meat." I felt heartsick. "Don't worry, Your Majesty. Those noodles are served in vegetarian broth." Qizhe's eyes lit up. The Empress Dowager grabbed me and asked, "Changjuan, what noodles?" I snatched my sleeve out of the Empress Dowager's claws and said, "I think the Imperial kitchens really won't be able to recreate their authentic flavor. Permit me to go out to find someone to make them." 2. I took Wang Yo and a few other eunuchs, changed into ordinary clothes, and rode a small carriage to River Snail Alley off Four Seasons Lane. By the small shopfront at the corner of the alley, the words "Old Xue's Noodle Shop" were obscured by snow, the strokes barely visible. Customers went in and out, and the shade was raised to release puffs of steam. I let down the carriage curtain and said, "We're here." Some years ago, when my mother was still living, and the emperor was still crown prince, when Titan, Qili, and the whole crowd of children had first started coming to Huai Manor all the time, it was also the last month, shortly before the New Year, when the sky cleared after a snowfall. I had some free time and came to the market to walk around. I read some contemporary spring festival couplets, then stood for a bit at a stall that sold odds and ends. Suddenly, below the heads of the crowd, I saw a number of small heads racing toward the fireworks stall. These were my Imperial nephews, Titan, Tifei, Qili, a whole string of them. All at once, I finally understood why my mother thrashed me when I snuck out to wander around the market when I was little. Looking at those racing children now, I also wanted to grab them and give them a thrashing. With their little sable cloaks, their little jade pendants stitched with pearls, their little fur-lined boots, and their little witless faces, they were simply calling out to all kidnappers in the world, "Here are some plump little lambs ready to hand. Be sure not to pass them up." Which moronic stewards had let these princes play around here? There had to be guards keeping watch in secret, but weren't they worried about losing them? Looking at those heads scurrying around, my heart skipped. and I nearly forgot that one of my legs was lame. I shot like an arrow toward the lantern stall and grabbed hold of Qizhe, who was at the head of the pack. He looked up and saw me, gave me a grin that was missing a front tooth, and stuck out his tongue. Teton howled and threw himself at me, hugging my leg. Little uncle, Uncle Juin, I want that lantern. What are all of you doing here? I said sternly. With a look of sophistication, Qizhe said, There's people following us. If anything happens to us, their whole families will pay for it with their lives. If anything happens, I said, even if their whole families pay with it with their lives, it still won't get you back. Chuckling, Qizhe said, Yes, Uncle, we know. Qizhe was a picture of innocence. We're all being very good. Teton dangled desperately from my leg. Uncle Juin, the lantern. My head was about to explode. As I got out my purse, Qizhe suddenly gasped, There! Over there! I looked where he was pointing and gasped as well. Isn't that the Crown Prince? Teton ducked behind me. Eunuch Wang is coming to catch me. I'm not going with him. Qizhe's mouth puckered. Qizhe looked at me and shook his head. My big brother, the Crown Prince, didn't come with us. The Crown Prince was accompanied by Wang Guo and 2 other important palace eunuchs. Of course he hadn't come with the rest of them. Before I could work out what was happening, Wang Guo and the others guarding Chee-juh had arrived in front of us. Teton and Qizhe immediately behaved, and Qizhe and the others stepped back behind the 2 of them. There were too many people around to speak openly. I could only bow and ask, What are you doing here? Wang Guo said, The family permitted it. I couldn't help looking around. The whole street was full of ordinary passers-by, and there was no way to know how many were genuine. Smiling, Wang Guo said, Since we've run into each other, the young master can walk around with his uncle. Qizhe agreed, and he did so. He stood perfectly upright with his chest out. There was a clear distinction between him and Teton and the others, who were leaning and slouching. But could such a small child really be happy posturing like this? Though Qizhe and the rest had often been told by the adults to get closer to the Crown Prince, children were children, after all. They couldn't have too much fun playing with the Crown Prince. When he was present, they had to restrain themselves. They'd come on a rare trip to the market, but now they couldn't enjoy themselves properly. They were a little dispirited. Teton stood pressed against my leg. He had stopped yelling, just kept tugging on my cloak with all his strength, telling me not to forget about the lantern because of his Imperial brother. I got out money and bought the fish lantern he'd had his eye on. Teton instantly livened up. Holding up the new toy, he pranced around ebulliently. Wang Guo grinned and said, Honestly, little young master, you have all kinds of marvelous things at home, but you like this thing instead. Teton wrinkled his nose. Qizhe said, With our eldest brother here, the first thing we buy ought to go to him. Teton immediately hugged the lantern, and Qizhe said, No need. I don't want it. You play with it, little brother. Then Teton grinned and looked all around with the lantern under his arm. When he caught sight of a sugar drop seller, he shook my leg again. Uncle, that one. You cannot eat those, said Wang Guo. Teton looked mullish. I said, They're already here. Let them have fun. I ate those when I was little. They're not dirty at all. I bought a bag of sugar drops. Wang Guo tasted one first, then let Teton eat them. Qizhe, and the rest all crowded around to snatch them. Chee-juh stood upright, not making a sound. I said, Would you like to try one? Chee-juh cast down his eyes. Wang Guo said, The young master doesn't eat sticky things. Teton's belly was like a bottomless pit. He ate the sugar drops, then wanted a fruitcake. After he gobbled up the fruitcake, he clamored for meatballs. When Qizhe, and the others wanted to eat something, they didn't say so, but prodded Teton into asking for it too. As taster, Wang Guo was rubbing his belly. Qizhe kept walking tidily forward, his attention undivided. Wang Guo quietly said to me in admiration, Have a look at that. Now that is conduct befitting a crown prince. He really is different. I was just considering what answer to make when Teton yelled, Uncle, I want that red cake. The so-called red cake was a hawthorn jelly, half jelly and half cake. It was a little cold to eat in winter, but Titan wanted it, and even Wang Yo wasn't against it. Eating a little is all right, and I can have a taste myself. I bought the cake, and Wang Yo tasted it. I was just about to split it up for the children when I caught a glimpse of Qizhe still standing there unmoving, eyes fixed on the cake in my hands. "Would you like to try it?" I said. Qizhe said nothing, but he didn't cast down his eyes. I said, "It's sweet and sour, but a little cold." Qizhe kept looking. I could only say, "Will you have a piece?" Finally, Qizhe cast down his eyes and said, "Very well." Wang Yo passed a small piece to Qizhe, while the rest was snatched up by Titan and the others. Qizhe took the hawthorn cake and bit off a corner. He chewed it carefully, swallowed, then bit off more. In the blink of an eye, he had eaten the whole cake. I couldn't stop myself asking, "Does it suit your taste?" Qizhe nodded, opened his mouth, and hiccuped. 3. The Crown Princess hiccuping was an event that might go nowhere or anywhere. Wang Yo looked wretched, and I was at a loss. The Empress was too careful with her son. She had coddled him so much that a small piece of hawthorn cake would make him hiccup. Qizhe was hiccuping non-stop. Wang Yo slapped himself in the face. "Ha! I ought to die. To let the young master eat a thing like that." I was the one who had bought the thing. When he slapped himself in the face, it was as good as slapping me. But I didn't stop him. I looked around. The sign for Old Xue's noodle shop was right in front of us. I said, "Come into the shop for some hot soup, young master. Wash it down, and you'll be fine." Wang Yo looked at the shop front and wrinkled his nose. "I come to this shop often. You can relax." Because it wasn't mealtime, there were hardly any customers in the shop. Wang Yo, looking disdainful, wiped a big bench, then put down a mat, and only then invited Qizhe and my Imperial and Royal nephews to sit. Old Xue came out with a towel hanging around his neck. He looked at me and smiled. "What are you doing here at this time, young master?" Then he glanced at Qizhe and the others. "Hey, these have the look of little masters. You must have been married very young to have children this grown up, young master." "My nephews," I said. "This child ate something cold out in the street and got the hiccups. He wants some hot soup to drink." Old Xue looked apologetic. "Young master, I'm sorry. The stock has all been sold. It's a good day for year-end purchases, and there are many people at the market. I sold out at midday. Why don't I make a bowl of sour soup and hand-pulled noodles?" "That will do," I said. Old Xue's shop was a place I had run across inadvertently. It was a small shop front, but very clean. Old Xue came from the area of Qingling, and the food in his shop was excellent. I had even hinted to my own cook that he should come and eat here. Tried to pick something up, but he couldn't produce the same flavors. Old Xue went into the kitchen. Before long, he brought out a big bowl of noodles. It was steaming, redolent of sourness. I had Old Xue bring out 2 small dishes, pretending it was to check whether it was hot or cold. It had to be ladled out and tasted before the Crown Prince could be invited to partake. Qizhe sipped a couple of mouthfuls of hot broth and finally stopped hiccuping, and Wang Yo looked as if an enormous weight had lifted from him. Titan looked longingly at me, gulping. He said, "Uncle, I want some." I didn't believe he still had room for anything, but to avoid a fuss, I simply had Old Xue bring out another little bowl, which I had split with my other Imperial nephews. Titan ate a couple of mouthfuls and, as expected, could eat no more. He hugged his lantern and played with Qifei and the others. I was a little hungry, though, so I ate some more. While I ate, I noticed that the Crown Prince had actually eaten his entire bowl. At last I knew something. The Crown Prince liked food that was a little sour. I learned only later that Titan and the others had previously slipped out of Zhong Manor. When they were discovered, the matter was reported to the palace. The consorts and concubines were horrified, and Prince Zhong himself entered the imperial presence to apologize. The late emperor said, "Some children going out to play in the street is no big deal. At their age, we were already going out hunting. Boys should see the world. As long as they are properly escorted, there is no harm in them going to the market occasionally. Call it an early experience of the plight of the common people. It was only with the late emperor's permission that Qizhe and the others had successfully snuck out that day. The empress had refused to be excluded and had immediately sent her son out as well. Upon returning to the palace, purely over the business of eating noodles at a noodle shop, Wang Yo let loose with boundless praise before the late emperor, saying how deeply the crown prince shared in the joys and sorrows of the common people. The late emperor was delighted to hear it. No one looked into the matter of the crown prince having the hiccups. Thinking back on it now, it was very funny. But I was surprised that Qizhe still remembered that bowl of noodles. 4. Old Xue's hands trembled incessantly when he entered the palace, but fortunately, they steadied when he wielded knife and spatula. Sour broth with hand-pulled noodles was a common foodstuff, with ingredients that were actually very simple. The essence lay in how the noodles were prepared and pulled. The noodles must be smooth and chewy, pulled long and even, each one enough to fill a bowl. The noodles were immersed in sour broth, then wood ear mushrooms, daylily stalks, and fried tofu cubes were added, and finally, chopped coriander was sprinkled on top. The noodles were brought to the emperor's bedside. Qizhe insisted on getting out of bed. The Empress Dowager wouldn't let him, but the imperial physician said that it would do His Majesty good, so Chee-juh sat at the table, facing the bowl of noodles, and unrestrained joy appeared on his face. Just for a moment, he no longer seemed to be an emperor, just a child who wanted something to eat. Before taking up his chopsticks, Chee-juh said to me, "You have been kept busy because of us, Imperial Uncle. Have you eaten?" "I ate at midday," I said. "Is it already time for dinner?" said Qizhe. "You must be fatigued, Imperial Uncle. Eat these noodles with us." Again I was taken aback. Qizhe had already instructed the attendants to bring me a chair. The Empress Dowager said, "As this is His Majesty's solicitude toward Prince Huai, His Highness should not refuse." So I thanked him. It had stopped snowing outside, and the snowbanks cast reflections on the window screens, making the evening brighter than usual. The room was as warm as the middle of spring. The palace eunuch serving us gave me a bowl. Qizhe said, "Serve Imperial Uncle first." "Thank you for your favor, Your Majesty. I dare not accept." The Empress Dowager said, "There is no need to be reserved, Prince Huai. We're all family here." Piping hot noodles were ladled into our bowls. Here and now, we really did seem like an ordinary uncle and nephew about to eat together. "Your Majesty should eat first," I said. Smiling slightly, Qizhe said, "You first." Half kneeling, I picked up my bowl and ate some noodles, then drank some broth. Qizhe finally lifted his chopsticks and began to eat. I accepted a napkin and dabbed my mouth. "Enjoy, Your Majesty. I will take my leave." Qizhe looked up at me, his expression slightly startled. "Why won't you eat any more, Imperial Uncle?" Smiling, I said, "Thank you for your concern, Your Majesty. I really am full." Qizhe cast down his eyes. "Very well. You have spent half this day running around because of us. Go home and rest." I donned my cloak and exited the imperial sleeping quarters. A cold wind swept snow into the corridor, with a chill that went to the bone. 5. "Would Your Highness like to get out to eat noodles?" Yunyu asked me this question with a bright smile. I let down the carriage curtain. "Suya is making fun of me with that old story again." "I asked the question sincerely," said Yunyu. "This street is so magnificent, its businesses so flourishing, and all thanks to Your Highness's blessings. Your Highness ought to come here often to stroll and reminisce." I raised my eyebrows and said, "It's thanks to His Majesty's bounteous favor. I don't dare take credit. I'd like to reminisce, but doing so on my own always feels lonely. Will you come with me, Suya?" Smiling, Yunyu said, "I cannot accept this favor, Your Highness. Forgive me. I have southern tastes and rarely eat noodles. And besides, I think that the noodles in this street really aren't good to eat anymore." "Finally, you're telling the truth, Suya," I said. Since old Xue had gone to the palace to make that bowl of noodles for the emperor, many years had passed. The emperor and the Empress Dowager had both richly rewarded old Xue, And so his little noodle shop had instantly become a fine restaurant, packed to bursting with customers every day. All the capital's various restaurants switched to serving teen ling flavors, putting sour soup noodles at the top of their menus. Old Qizhe had 3 sons. They came to blows over which one would inherit the old man's mantle. Even his sons-in-law came to get in on it. That matter had come all the way to Huai Manor, where they asked me to pass judgment for them. Old Qizhe couldn't stop his sons from fighting. He got so angry he had a stroke and passed away not long after. His sons made a mess in their squabble over their family property. Finally, each of them opened a restaurant of their own. Authentic Old Qizhe, heir to Old Qizhe, Old Qizhe's secret recipe. Each sign was flashier than the last, and more novelties went into the noodles. Caterpillar fungus and aged ginseng, signature noodle broth made with 1,000-year-old turtle. River Snail Alley of 4 Seasons Lane had changed its name to Golden Snail Road. Every time I passed by, the name of the street dizzied me, and I hurried on. I spent half the day drinking with Yunyu at Yehua Pavilion. When I left, I was a little tipsy. Actually, I had gone out today to dodge trouble. Titan wanted to buy the nails from a horseshoe of Xiao He's steed, which he had ridden as he chased Han Xin by moonlight. Footnote number 18. Shortly preceding the founding of the Han Dynasty, Xiao He was an advisor to the future emperor who chased after Han Xin so he could take him back to the court to recommend him as general. A set of 4,000 or 5,000 liang of silver. He had already come to Huai Manor twice. My mother-in-law had come to see her daughter today. Mother and daughter were huddled together inside, weeping bitterly, as if the princess were even now languishing in hell. In fact, I had already said that Ruju's family was welcome to come see her at any time, and she could always go home to see them. But they insisted on being like this, and there was nothing I could do about it. I just made space for mother and daughter to have their cry and vent their feelings, both saying that they must not let me overhear them. An Imperial censor had submitted a memorial complaining that I was extravagant and went out nightly for entertainment. Huai Manor had nearly been ruined by Titan. How was I supposed to afford extravagance? If I couldn't even have an occasional cup of wine and enjoy myself a little, they might as well execute me and get it over with. Perhaps I would tell the stewards not to purchase anything for the new year this time. Anyway, it would just be me and the princess sitting around awkwardly. Every time she saw me, it was as if she couldn't bring herself to eat. We might as well imitate the life of the poor, pick up 2 jin of meat, have the kitchen make some dumplings and throw them in a pot, and have a bowl each. That would be an unconventional way to bid farewell to the old and welcome the new, and not extravagant. Actually, the gifts I sent to the palace each year were the greatest expense, but I couldn't do without. Well, I hadn't decided what gifts to send yet. Forget it. I would think about it some other day. Chee-juh had said to me, "Come to the palace on the night of the 13th, Imperial Uncle. Eat New Year's Eve dinner with us." As was customary, I thanked him and declined. Now that I had thought about it, these past couple of years, I had been invited to eat at the palace less and less. This year, it had been only a few times, like the Lantern Festival and Mid-Autumn Festival. There would probably be no more invitations this year. Sparse snow drifted through the air. I left my sedan, dismissed my retinue, and slowly walked on alone. For much of the day, I'd had only wine to drink and hadn't eaten anything proper. With the wind blowing on me, my stomach felt a little empty. It was the last month again, the year nearly over. The swift passage of time always struck me as a little poignant. At the corner, I heard someone say, "A bowl of vegetarian noodles." The stall owner lifted the pot lid. Steam swirled up. "Do you want ginger or vinegar?" "Vinegar." I strolled over and sat at a small table under the awning. "A bowl of lamb noodles." The person who had asked for vegetarian noodles looked my way, then instantly got to his feet. I acted as if I'd just happened to spot him and, smiling, said with faint surprise, "Oh, Chancellor Zhao Cai. What a coincidence. You've also come to eat noodles. Why don't we sit together? Afterword. Hello, dear readers. Thank you very much for reading my humble work. Allow me to introduce myself briefly. I'm an author from China. Many people often ask me the same question when they first get to know me. Why did you choose such a pen name? The gale blows by. The reason actually might sound a bit whimsical. Years ago, I was reading a novel on a literary website and got so hooked that I suddenly had the urge to give writing a try as well. It just so happened to be windy and raining when I registered my pen name, so I spontaneously came up with this name. I didn't expect it to become my official pseudonym that I'd keep on using. Many authors put much thought into the selection of their pen names, and they would even consult experts to ensure that it be an auspicious name. In comparison, mine is more admittedly casually chosen. I used to submit short stories to magazines in the early days, but it wasn't until after I adopted the pen name Feng Gua Guo that I started serializing longer novels online. Then I had the fortune of seeing them published as physical books after the novels were completed. The genres of my humble works are quite diverse, and they include romance novels, adventure novels, detective novels, and so on. However, I mostly write stories set in ancient China or with immortality and fantasy elements. The physical North American releases that I have the honor of seeing published this time, Peach Blossom Dead and The Imperial Uncle, are both respectively an immortal fantasy novel and a novel set in fictional ancient China. It should be noted that most of the settings in my novels are made up. For example, the dynasty in The Imperial Uncle is entirely fictional and does not exist in history. Peach Blossom Dead, on the other hand, borrows from the settings of traditional Chinese immortals, but the main immortal protagonist of the story, as well as some settings of the heavenly court and the mortal realm, are my own creations. In fact, I was taking the lazy way out by doing this. Writing with a historical dynasty as a background will require me to do rigorous research. Attire, food, architecture, etiquette, and even the words and phrases used would have to be consistent with historical facts. Otherwise, I'd make a big fool of myself if there were any errors. It's a lot easier to make things up and borrow information from ancient times like I do. I'm very grateful to Peach Flower House for their willingness to translate and publish The Imperial Uncle and Peach Blossom Dead in English. This is my first time having books published in English. I am very apprehensive about whether these two books will be well received by North American readers. My humble works are set in ancient China, so the characters' names may be confusing to North American readers. In ancient China, people had a courtesy name in addition to their given names. Men would get their courtesy names when they came of age at 20. In other words, they would hold a coming-of-age ceremony when they were 20 years old and obtain a courtesy name, which they would then use. The meanings of courtesy names were generally related to those of the given names, and I have retained this custom in my writings. For example, in The Imperial Uncle, Jing Weiyi's courtesy name is Chengjuan, Liu Tongyi's is Zhan Cai, and Yunyu's is Suiya. Readers unfamiliar with this cultural background may find the names confusing and perplexing. In addition, the male protagonist in The Imperial Uncle would address others by their courtesy names in his interactions with them to show affection. For instance, calling Liu Tongyi Zhan Cai. In reality, courtesy names were a respectful form of address in ancient China. If the parties weren't on very familiar terms with one another, they couldn't directly call each other by their full name, but rather by courtesy names. By all reason, saying Liu Tongyi or Tong-yee would be more intimate than Zhan Cai. Yet, due to Jing Weiyi's noble status, it's natural for him to call the others directly by their full names, while Zhan Cai, Suiya, conveys a sense of respect with a touch of affection. This might also be challenging for readers unfamiliar with the background of ancient China to grasp. On the other hand, in Peach Blossom Dead, most of the main characters are referred to by their given names, with rarely any mention of their courtesy names. However, as they are all immortals, they also have an additional immortal title. As such, I'm worried that my readers would find the multitude of names in my works too confusing to remember. Nonetheless, I personally think that my novels are lighthearted. Okay. And I didn't give it too much thought when I wrote them, either. These humble works are ordinary light fiction meant to be relaxing, entertaining reads in your spare leisure time. What left a deep impression on me during my communication with the publication staff in this collaboration was their professionalism and meticulousness. Peach Blossom Det and The Imperial Uncle were completed years ago, and I have a habit of revising my works periodically or before each publication of a book. I'm now self-reflecting on whether this habit is necessarily correct. I myself thought that over time, my writing would perhaps be a little more mature than it was before, and that I might notice some oversights when rereading my past works. Many readers would also offer me suggestions, especially now that readers can communicate with authors online at any time. For example, a reader once told me that after reading The Imperial Uncle that they felt Cheng-juan falls in love too easily, and they hoped I would make him a little more steadfast in his feelings. Or another reader would feel Jing Wei-yi was too mean toward Yun-yu and hope the bond between them could be a little lighter, so that Yun-yu could be a little freer. There was a period of time when I was more susceptible to influence, so I had numerous revisions to the works when presented with the opportunity to finish physical books. For this North American version, the staff communicated with me in all earnestness, even doing a word-for-word comparison of the various versions, upon which they expressed their opinion that the earliest version was the most suitable. I am touched by such thoroughness and meticulousness. To the North American book market, my humble works and I are new, like a blank piece of paper, which subsequently means that sales would be hard to predict. Even so, the staff treated my works with such focus and conscientiousness. Their professionalism is truly admirable. Upon rereading, I realized that while the earliest versions had more writing flaws, the emotions conveyed were really more complete and robust. For that reason, the earliest versions of these two novels were published. There were many oversights and shortcomings in the content, and I appreciate the efforts of the translators and editors in translating and correcting them. The North American version of The Imperial Uncle not only has the earliest uncensored content, but also the complete collection of 4 extras, making it the most complete physical edition to date. This seems to align with the story. For Cheng-juan, the first is best. As for Peach Blossom Det, I'm sorry to say there's only one very short extra titled The Living Immortal. There are no more special extras. After Peach Blossom Det, I wrote another story set in the same universe, The Egg of Wishes. I personally considered this novel to be the extra for Peach Blossom Det, so I didn't write any more. Over the years, I have written many other novels, and both my state of mind and writing style have changed. I'm worried that if I write another extra, it might not match the style of the original work. And besides, I do feel like this novel, while not long in length, is already very complete, and I think the existing contents are sufficient. Am I finding excuses for my laziness? I'll leave it to you, my dear readers, to decide. As we reach the end of this afterword, I would like to express my thanks to the editors, translators, designers, and publisher. Thank you for your love and support for my humble works. Of course, thank you, too, dear reader, for your willingness to read and buy this book. Here's to wishing you the best of luck and fortune. May your endeavors go as your heart desires. Feng Gua Guo. Alrighty, everyone. That concludes the reading of The Imperial Uncle by Feng Gua Guo, translated by Danglars. So I don't really have a lot to say, I guess, on the final extras that we've read, but let me go ahead and at least look at my notes and give you what I got. So, sorry, let me grab this sticky note and just put it in the book. The first thing that I want to say is I thought it was interesting that Jing Wei-yi found things to be too smooth in his relationship with Zhao Cai. And at first, what I was thinking is that because I know what this experience is like feeling like things are just going too well. Because earlier this year, I mean, aside from my physical difficulties, there was a point where I was just really happy and grateful because there were many good things happening in life. And I remember talking to my therapist one day and I was like, everything, it just seems like it's too good, minus my physical health. And because I had lived a life prior to that, so used to something always happening, living always in a state of anxiety, worried about what did I do wrong now, that being in this state, it was just kind of weird to me. And I felt my brain wanting to self-sabotage just for a moment, because I remember thinking like, I got this promotion, I'm painting now, I'm in a great mentorship, I'm getting more money, I'm able to buy all the figurines and books that I want to buy and all the paint and watercolor paper, yada, yada, yada. And I was like, I'm going to quit my job. Just randomly, I'm going to quit my job. And it was like, wait. And I had to sit there with myself for a second and be like, wait, what are you doing? What are you even thinking, Mari? Why would you quit your job? Your job plays a part in why you are happy about certain things. Able to buy the figurines, which I spent a ghastly amount of money on. This year, I have bought 38 total figurines. And I'm sure that I have spent $1,000 or so. Or even when I think about all the books that I've bought this year, I have spent a lot of money. And I was just like, what are you doing? If you quit your job, you're taking away part of the thing that makes you happy. Not necessarily the job, but the things that result from it. And so for a second when reading, I thought that Jing Wei was going to self-sabotage. And I thought about his life experience, right? He lived his whole life with people thinking that he was one way when he was just trying to live his life happy and idly. And, he even went to a point where he was trying to prove that he was a loyal subject, and that ended up going in flames. And so I actually thought that Feng Gua Guo writing that was a very relatable thing. And even him attempting to get Zhanse drunk and succeeding in that was not self-sabotage at all, but I definitely understand him just wanting a little excitement, because it's like things are going too perfect. Why is he just going along with everything like there's no problem at all? Now, speaking of going along with everything and nothing at all, at first I was really hoping that it wasn't the case where Zhanse was just going along with everything simply because he felt guilty about anything, but that wasn't mentioned, so yay. And getting him drunk was quite interesting. So he becomes the drunken hero, which is quite funny. I'm reminded of, it was so long ago that I watched it. I don't even remember the name because I was a kid. Jackie Chan's Drunken something something. It reminded me of that, kinda. But anyway, drunk Zhanse means bottom Jing Wei. That is what I have gathered. And so he was like, I don't want to do that again. Let me throw out all this coconut milk, which was really funny. I appreciated that extra so much because I needed it, especially after the two previous extras, which for me were kind of like, eh. So I was very happy about that one. But then we get to the last extra, and I was not happy about that one. It was well written, yes, even though I don't really understand the point of breaking up everything into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 when it's just the continuation of the story. Nevertheless, I didn't want to go back to that time period. I didn't want to go back to Qizhe living the most miserable life as a child. I don't know. Are extras not for happiness and fluff and all the good things that we want? Are extras meant for us to recall past things that make us sad and recall past things of characters receiving some kind of torment and torture and stuff? Because that's pretty much like, come on. That's what we've been getting in the extras. And again, was it well written? Yes, but I would have rather this be written within the story. I would have rather the first two extras had been written within the story, although it would have been weird. I'd rather just not have read it at all, to be honest. But I don't want those things for the extras. Anyway, nonetheless, Qizhe's mother, the Empress Dowager, is really awful. And it's just so horrible because there are so many mothers out there in the world who are thinking that they're doing what's best for their child. And they're really the reason why their child ends up having so much pain or sickness or just whatever. And it's like, woman, the reason why Qizhe is experiencing this sickness is because of you. You wouldn't let him eat. And now that he won't eat, you have a problem with him not eating. But it's like he can't, like he don't wanna, so it's, oh my God, this woman, I just want to go into that book and just like grab the hardest item I can and knock her out for a minute and hope that she'll wake up with a not bigger, but a smarter brain. With that being said though, with Feng Gua Guo giving us the final extra, it kind of just made me wish that the story went ahead and had the Emperor Qizhe and Jing Wei, his imperial uncle, be the pairing, be the ship. Because I just feel so bad for Qizhe. I'm like, gosh, I really wish you could have led a happy life. Or even if your life was hard, I wish there was some aspect of it that was constant, because their relationship with each other wasn't constant. It wasn't solid for real. I wish you would have had a constant source of happiness and that it could have been the imperial uncle, but it is what it is, you guys. I don't know. So because there really isn't much left for me to say, I don't think there's a point in me doing a whole video on my favorite aspects and this and that and d. So I'm just going to say really quickly the things that I like overall about this novel, because I do think it was really good and I'm still trying to figure out my rating, but right now I'm thinking maybe an 8.5 out of 10. Might revisit that later. So my overall likes, first, I think that ultimately it seems to have a very funny tone of voice. Jing Wei, that is. Even though there are a lot of sad things going on and it is a very heavy read, I do still feel like he's trying to be carefree and he's just a bit funny. He gives me Shen Yuan vibes, like I said, as far as his inner monologue is concerned. So that is also something that I love. The other thing that I love about this novel is the slow burn of the plot. And for a while, I was trying to figure out exactly how to explain exactly how I feel about it, because my experience that I told you I couldn't explain properly my experience. And so I finally was able to say it when I was writing. And that is that this novel's intense yet very lax plot is like a whisper. It has deep heaviness within it that slowly builds layer upon layer of each little whisper until it festers into a loud voice into the heart and the mind. So like nothing really takes you by surprise, and yet things do. Everything is paced naturally, and yet the peak of the story, it feels like it just like took my breath away. Like, whoa, wait, what, huh? So that's the best way to describe this novel for me. I also really love the fact that it was in first person. It really put me into the shoes of Jing Wei very nicely. And I also like that he, I believe, for the most part, was a reliable narrator, even if he was figuring his own self out in regards to love and all of those things. It wasn't too crazy. So my overall dislikes, aside from the extras, it's going to be the constant reminiscing in detail. Not the constant reminiscing, but in detail. I feel like some things could have just been a bit more to the point, tell us the end result rather than walking us through the scene. And that would have been fine with me. Even though after reading, I appreciate it all. It's cool. And I'm just nitpicking, I guess. And then, like I said, the extras. I didn't really care for any of the extras like that except for the third one. My favorite character is obviously Jing Wei. I don't think I need to elaborate on that. My least favorite character, and it's not because they did anything for real, but it's going to be the Emperor, Qizhe. He just led such a miserable life, and there wasn't really anything special happening there. I don't know. He was just my least favorite character, not because I disliked him. Least favorite does not mean disliked. It just means not my favorite. So if I had to pick someone, it would be him. Now, if I did have to pick a most disliked character, which again, I'm still pulling a stretch here, it would be Yun Yu. And that's just because of how everything went as far as him being a spy. And you guys, I don't think I need to elaborate on that. Point is, he lost a bit of my respect, and it is what it is. I know that he was doing his job. Okay, I know that. But still, I just... Like, even in their interactions with each other when Jing Wei-yi was in prison, it's not like he was like, okay, I think I need to learn more. Maybe there's a misunderstanding or something or other or nothing. It was just like, here are 2 paths to choose from. Pick them. Okay, that's it. And then so finally, there was only one quote in this entire story that stood out to me, and that was on page 16. And that was what I shared before. If you can only eat sweets, your mind dwells on salt. So that's all I have to say about The Imperial Uncle by Feng Gua Guo. I hope you all enjoyed it. Please let me know your thoughts and reactions in the comment section. And I am ready to just move on from here. You guys, the next thing that we read together officially is going to be The Battle of Sword and Wine, or Jiu, which is really Bring the Wine, but that's okay, by Tongyi. And then slowly we'll be making our way through Copper Coins. So yeah, I'm very excited. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your year, and I'll see you then. Or technically, by the time you get this video, I will be seeing you again because we're going to be going live to discuss The Wife Comes First. But anyway, yeah, well, I Neiman.